there was a large storm, and many people were caught out in the rain and wind. Then hail fell violently from the sky, and many people were scared and cried. After a short while, a silence fell upon the city where the storm had occurred. Looking upwards towards the grey and misty sky, up behind the tallest of buildings, a small patch of blue light appeared. Radiating from this spot was an immense streak of light that centered its beam on a low-rise tower block. There was a gentle breeze, and on this breeze there were sighs of relief carried from all those who had been so frightened before. As the clouds moved swiftly past the large corporation buildings, the subtle and comforting hum of the city returned. Walking amongst the citizens, dodging black umbrellas and large briefcases, there was a person, male or female, it does not matter. They wandered in and out of crowds, glancing up at the ever-clearing sky, and found themselves crossing a bridge. The crowds had disappeared, and all that remained was the person and the lonely sound of a slow-moving barge chug down the river. The water was brown, but then all of a sudden, when the sun burst forth from the bloated clouds, the river turned a beautiful green, the kind of green that is only seen in horse chestnut trees in the spring sunshine. Aware that no one else was there, the person let out a large and meditative sigh of joy and pleasure. As they did this, they thought about the one they loved, the one that always could bring a smile to their face. The sun now shone a hazy goldenness amongst the tall city buildings in the distance. Far off, on the roof of another corporation building, steam rose up, off into the clearing skies. The person left the bridge and smiled to themselves. As they walked, buildings began to disappear, perhaps not from sight, but from mind. All that remained was the mist and the thought of a loved one. This was enough for the person to survive on. All of a sudden, the pleasant and euphoric thoughts were disturbed by a sound, or perhaps a smell. Whatever it was, it upset the person greatly. No matter what it was that interrupted those thoughts, nothing would ever bring back that feeling. Looking downwards in a dizzy state, the person, so rudely awakened, saw a man, or perhaps a woman. We shall say it was a person. The person was not standing, nor was the person very small. So therefore the person was seated on the ground, in the cold shadow of a large corporation building. In that shadow, the ground was wet and puddles had formed around the person's feet. These feet were bare, which shocked the standing person so greatly that they fell to the ground amongst those puddles and touched those feet with intrigue and admiration. Such a sight it was to see those blue and glistening feet, such slender toes and curving heels. You see, in this city, everyone wore shoes, mainly because of the weather, for storms like the one described previously was not anything unusual. In this city, every person covered their feet and bodies, for they felt cold in the shadows of the corporation buildings. They did not, however, resent the corporation buildings for this, as they were happy and fulfilled in life, or so they thought. Anyway, back to the two people on the wet ground. The sun, as it tends to do, had moved round ever so graciously, and therefore lit the ground on which the two people sat. They looked into each other's eyes. What made them do this was unknown to them, but the eyes of the barefooted person lit up with ecstasy and joy, and the slow sun gently warmed and kissed their bare feet. Little by little, the sun caressed their feet, and they turned a beautiful golden color in that post-storm sunshine. And little by little, the puddles turned into steam, and floated up into the vista of the sky like souls from the peaceful dead. In this city, it was very unusual to see such a heavenly sight, for when people died in what was thought to be a peaceful way, their souls would linger heavily over the deceased bodies like flies over a corpse. The soul seldom rose up into the sky. This occurrence was very unusual, yet here in front of the person, the barefooted person's exposed and grand toes were emitting such beautiful soul-like mirages that the person immediately wanted to reveal their feet also. Eyes of wondrous colors still locked, the person slowly removed their shoes. These shoes had been purchased in the city and were designed to keep feet warm in times of a great storm. That is what they called it, you see, the great storm. Now these shoes, they were rather odd, not to yours or my eye, but to all the other people of the city that walked by in elegant slow motion. As they moved past, their eyes beheld a wondrous sight, for under those unusual shoes were the most wondrous feet you could ever fathom. And you see also, it was not really allowed in that ever-changing city to take off one's shoes, so it was really a magnificent sight. The shoes were discarded on the pavement where the two people sat, glancing wildly into each other's eyes. Most of the citizens were shocked, and some ashamed, to behold these shoes discarded on the cold concrete. For you see, in this city, everyone wore black shoes, just like how everyone carried a black umbrella. Now these shoes were no longer the center of attention, for it was the feet inside that really captured the citizens' imaginations. The sun had once again moved at its slow and steady pace, and now all sunlight filled the city and its crevices. Yes, even the crevices down between the corporation buildings and low-rise tower blocks. As if some great miracle had occurred, the many citizens started to stop, and slowly, ever so slowly, bend or kneel down to start touching their shoes. Their shoes were black and glossy in the sunlight, and they glistened as rainwater dripped off the waxy surface. Some just touched their shoes, others slowly untied the laces. Laces were gently tugged, twisted, played with, until that particular citizen's feet were out in that warm, sunny air. It was a moment of joy. The city filled with sounds of laughter, and excited voices chatted and exchanged thought, and for once, feelings. All around the city, people opened up their hearts and souls, and gradually a refreshing mist settled upon their toes. Once again the sun burst forth from the ever-changing clouds, and the steam rose up like souls once again into that sky, that turbulent and volatile sky. In that moment, the corporation buildings were gone. There were no longer any shadows, or crevices, or dark alleys. Light filled the city, and to the citizens, the world. Yet to the world looking in, it was not so happy, for they knew that the sun would soon go in behind the clouds of the tall skyscrapers and corporative buildings. Now we must not forget the two sitting on the pavement, for they are the most special people in this city. They truly felt sad, for they knew too that the sun would soon disappear. Staring into those now familiar eyes, tears ran down their faces and dripped constantly and regularly onto each other's toes. As the tears landed, a sharp pain was experienced that became greater and greater as the tears increased. And so it was a vicious circle, for tears were increased by the pain in the toes. The pair felt desperately frustrated. What could they do? They had seen for a moment such beauty among the people of their city, and yet now the clouds had begun to gather, and once again the sun disappeared behind the tall corporation buildings, and they felt cold once more. The rain started to fall, and as it touched all those exposed toes, the pain grew intense, not just for our found pair, but for the entire city. Cries, greater than anything heard before in the city, deafened the ears of the citizens. They deafened themselves. Screams, cries, panic. The shadows were upon them. They were cold and unprotected, and they felt betrayed by the pair who had first instigated them to remove their protective shoes. Immediately, they all forgot the pleasure and freedom and laughter they had experienced before, when the sun had washed their toes with love and adoration. They hurriedly and ashamedly replaced their shoes onto their blue feet, as this was the only way of stopping the immense pain. Yet the pair, they did not replace their shoes. Now the pain was considerable for them, but still the tears and rain fell, and they looked upon the citizens with shame and disappointment. They slowly began to die, for they were cold and wet in those shadows, and the sight of their fellow citizens replacing their shoes made them very sad. So sad that their hearts stopped beating. Their hearts were broken into two, and each half of heart joined with the opposite half of the other person's. At that moment they died. They both experienced the same feelings of despair and sadness. They grieved as they faded away. Yet their souls were seen to rise gracefully into the solemn and sinister air, and so they went to the heavens, or the place where they would be safe. The citizens saw the couple die, but they did not care. They once again had their shoes, their black glossy shoes, and their big black umbrellas. Once again the hail fell violently onto those umbrellas, and many people were afraid. Up in the corporation buildings, people sat comfortably in their black suits and black shoes. They thought that they were happy and fulfilled, but they were not. For the only people who were happy and joyful were the people who fell in love and remained in heavenly existence, staring into each other's many-colored eyes.